see a lot of anti-Semitism today. As I've watched anti-Semites on social media, I've noticed that rational thinking takes a back seat. Why? Perhaps it's because hatred distorts our thinking. You see, anti-Semites are often beholden to obsessive hatred. Anti-Semitism doesn't just lead to apathy. It's a hatred that leads to obsession. A spiritual issue at its core, when the anti-Semitic virus takes root, the anti-Semite can hardly think about anything other than Israel and the Jewish people. Conspiracies abound, all libels are assumed to be true, insidious questions are used to stir up the mobs and create suspicion. Anti-Israel is just a political viewpoint, they claim. I'm just asking questions, they say with a smirk. But observe the fruit of the anti-Semites. It's rotten, spiritually bankrupt, dark. But it's not new. This hatred, often referred to as the world's oldest hatred, starts in the heart and severely impacts the brain. The result? Irrational thinking and a corrupt heart. Irrational thinking leads to irrational behavior. So, how should we deal with anti-Semites? The book of Nehemiah is often used to teach leadership principles. That's great. Nehemiah was a good leader. However, the context of Nehemiah's leadership matters. Who was Nehemiah standing for? What was he standing for? Who was he up against? Nehemiah's context is oftentimes brushed off, watered down, or glossed over, as if Nehemiah, who he was and who he stood for and so forth, doesn't matter because this is the 21st century. But Nehemiah's context does matter. Nehemiah followed God. Nehemiah sought the best for Zion. He stood with the Jewish people. And his story, in all of its context, is in the Bible by God's design. He demonstrates good leadership qualities, sure, but he also exemplifies the spiritual battle against anti-Semitism. How so? Nehemiah provides a framework for dealing with the irrational, poor souls caught in the trap of obsessive hatred. He just wanted to rebuild walls to a destroyed city. Nehemiah 2:10 describes anti-Semites who opposed his God-given task. It says this: when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official heard that someone had come to seek the well-being of the Israelites, they were greatly displeased. Why would anti-Semites care about that? It's just the walls of a desolate city. Remember, irrational hatred. Let's learn how to deal with anti-Semitism by exploring some principles from Nehemiah. Our first principle is this: use discernment. You see, Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem invited Nehemiah to a meeting in the plain of Ono. They wanted to harm, or likely murder him, and intimidate him for rebuilding a wall. Chapter 6, verse 2 says, they were planning to harm me. Verse 9 of the same chapter says, they were all trying to intimidate us. This is irrational behavior. Thankfully, Nehemiah discerned anti-Semitic motives and refused to be distracted from his God-given mission. So again, the first principle is this: use discernment. Violence is promoted and glorified in these circles. At all costs, they shout. They meet it. Martyrdom is glorified. The second principle is this: confront lies with truth. Anti-Semites accused Nehemiah of plotting rebellion and wanting to be king. Israel's enemies made up lies out of thin air. The same is true today. Nehemiah denied the false charges directly and clearly. Chapter 6, verse 8, Nehemiah declares, there's nothing to these rumors you are spreading. You are inventing them in your own mind. Then, because dealing with lies can be exhausting, Nehemiah prayed for strength. Verse 9 says, but now, my God, strengthen me. So the second principle again is confront lies with truth. Firmly, without panic, while relying on God for courage and the results. The third principle is this: refuse to give in to fear. An anti-Semite in the book named Shemaiah tried to lure Nehemiah into hiding in the temple, suggesting fear of assassination. Nehemiah recognized it as a trap to discredit him and refused to act out of fear. Just as Balaam was hired to curse Israel many centuries before Nehemiah, so the anti-Semites of his day hired people to accomplish wickedness. Nehemiah says this about the incident in chapter 6, verse 13. He was hired so that I would be intimidated, do as he suggested, sin, and get a bad reputation, in order that they could discredit me. Refuse to give in to fear. Be aware of outlandish tactics, but do not let intimidation drive your actions. Fear is a weapon of the enemy. Our fourth principle is this: be disciplined in prayer. Whenever Nehemiah faced opposition, he turned first to prayer. We see this example in Nehemiah chapter 4, verses 4 and 5, and other places. He asked God to help him deal with the enemies and to strengthen the workers. Chapter 4, verse 9 says this: "So we prayed to our God and stationed a guard because of them day and night." So again, be disciplined in prayer. Opposition is real. Anchor every response in prayer. Dependence on God, first and foremost, guards against rash or purely human reactions. Know that God's at work. Fifth principle is this: implement strategic protection. When anti-Semites threatened violence, Nehemiah organized armed guards while the people continued building. He took threats seriously. Chapter 4, verses 17 and 18 relates the following: "The laborers who carried the loads worked with one hand and held a weapon in the other. Each of the builders had his sword strapped around his waist while he was building, and the trumpeter was beside me." Implement strategic protection. Combine faith with wise preparation. Trust God, but also take practical steps for security. Anti-Semitism often leads to violence, as evidenced by pogroms, crusades, the Shoah, Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, and some pro-Palestine mobs. The sixth principle is this: persist in the mission. Despite ridicule, threats, plots, the people persisted in building. When the mission was complete, Nehemiah then credited the proper source, the God of Zion. We see this evidenced in chapter 6, verses 15 and 16. "The wall was completed in 52 days, on the 25th day of the month Elul. When all the enemies heard this, all the surrounding nations were intimidated and lost their confidence, for they realized that this task had been accomplished by our God." Persist in the mission that God has given you. Perseverance and obedience shames opposition and glorifies God. God may not be calling you to physically return to Zion and begin rebuilding a wall like he did Nehemiah. But the same principles and the same heart of God exists today. Psalm 87:2 says, "The Lord loves the gates of Zion more than all the dwellings of Jacob." At your death, will you be able to inscribe Nehemiah's prayer on your tombstone? It's found in chapter 5, verse 19. "Remember me favorably, my God, for all that I have done for this people." Thanks so much for joining us today. We encourage you to hit that like and subscribe on your way out, and do share the video with others. Until next time, shalom.